So the Verde River is a 189-mile river. It stretches from where it starts just north of Prescott all the way down to the Salt River near Fountain Hills, just north of the Phoenix metro area. The river is quite beautiful. It's a lush ribbon of green in this kind of otherwise desert landscape. And it's a very healthy, intact riparian forest. We have cottonwoods and willows. We also have along our banks agriculture, growing all sorts of things. It's a really important biological hotspot with, I think, 90-something species depending on it for some part of their life cycle.
I'm Claudia Hauser of Hauser & Hauser Farms here in Camp Verde, Arizona. My family farms. The family's been farming for many generations, starting in Iowa, moved to Tolleson, and ended up in Camp Verde here farming. And I have 4 children that help farm. Sadly, my husband passed away a year and a half ago from cancer, but we still continue farming and continue his legacy of growing crops here in the Verde.
My name is Chip Norton. I'm the owner of Sinagua Malt. Sinagua Malt is a benefit corporation that buys raw barley from local farmers, and we process it into malted barley, and we sell that to craft brewers, artisan bakers, craft distilleries. And the purpose of Sinagua Malt is to improve summer flows in the Verde River. I retired in 2008 and started an encore career, an unpaid career of doing river conservation projects. And then Kim Schoeneck with the Nature Conservancy approached me and said, and Steve had been saying, we ought to be thinking about malt.
Chip had been involved in some conservation efforts, of which I was a huge supporter of. We would brew beer on my patio on the weekends and talk about everything from beer to river conservation, to the Verde Valley, to why we live here. And eventually one day Chip came to my house and we were talking a little bit about a concept that Kim Schoeneck with the Nature Conservancy and others were touting out there called crop swapping. And it was removing high water use crops like alfalfa from the field and putting in lower water use crops like barley. Barley has an added advantage in it, it's a winter crop. So it is growing when the river has lots of water in it during the winter. What it doesn't have a lot of water in it is in the summertime when all the irrigation diversions are taking water out of the river. So it made a lot of sense if we could make barley work somehow on this. The barley came, Chip asked me about barley because we were brewing beer.
We took out alfalfa to put the barley in. So alfalfa, you have to continually water it through the summer. So when we did the crop conversion to the barley, it's harvested in June. So those fields will sit fallow all summer long. So we won't stress the river out during that time. So it works out very well.
The link between the farmer and the consumer is there are no malting facilities in the state of Arizona. So if you'd be willing to launch into that, then we would have a link to connect the two and create all these conservation benefits.
Everybody banks a little differently, and in this day and age, that can mean banking in a branch, in your office, or even on your living room couch. OneAZ Credit Union is ready to meet you with simple, secure banking solutions, wherever you are. Stop by a branch, chat with a banker online, or deposit a check using the highly rated mobile app. So let's bank together, Arizona. Learn more at oneazcu.com/together.
The story of human habitation on the Verde River really goes back 10,000 years. We have initially started, the first were the nomadic tribes that came through here. We know that sometime around between the time of birth of Christ and the year 1000 that farmers started farming here along the river. Their canals are still here and they still get unearthed once in a while in flood events. We know that the Yavapai Apache inhabited the area probably starting about the same time that culture disappeared. And then in around 1865, the Americans arrived here on the river and began to cut additional canals in here and begin farming.
So this was really a great place to grow food, but that meant we started taking water out of the river. And so that's been going on since the 1860s. And so when we think about conservation and what are the threats and challenges in the future, we want to address those challenges that are bringing in additional pressure. So how do we reduce the impacts of groundwater pumping that have started over the last few decades while keeping the agriculture in the landscape? So we wanted to say, okay, agriculture is here, it's part of this. How do we protect that agriculture, but also achieve our conservation objectives?
The Verde River served as kind of a breadbasket. These farms did here. So it has a long history of agriculture and all of it being dependent solely upon this river and its tributaries.
And working with these farms, we've been able to protect water in the river and keep it flowing. Changing crops can reduce your consumptive use. You still keep the land in production, but you also reduce the amount of water you need. Implementing infrastructure projects that reduce demand, so flood irrigation, takes twice as much water as actually is needed. So when you convert to sprinklers or drip or line a ditch, you can really reduce your demand in that way.
I never really considered myself a farmer. I always thought my husband was, and then when he passed, I was like, I guess I am now. My boys do most of the field work, but there's a lot to farming that doesn't involve just field work. I'm really good at carrying a shovel and wearing irrigation boots. I do the books. I mean, there's a lot of work, and I'm so proud of, I'm not gonna say, I'm proud of my family, my boys, my daughter. We just are continuing this legacy. Kim met with my husband years ago and wanted to do this, and my husband had already thought about conservation easements. He already knew about them, so he was very willing to talk to them. So through a lot of luck and hard work, we were able to get conservation easements on 2 of these properties that we own here in Camp Verde.
So a conservation easement is a tool to remove the development rights from a property, and it retains its value as agriculture, which is great because then you can continue to farm it, but it removes the ability to subdivide and build houses and things like that. So it really protects the farm into the future. And this is a tool that's used across the country very effectively. We were able to secure the funding. It was a huge collaborative effort. It wasn't like you just fill out your application form and you turn it in magic. We had to work with our Natural Resource Conservation Service. We worked with the town on the designations that we needed. We called people, we lobbied for things, we pushed really hard to make sure that the funding was available for our area and that we had people willing to do the work once it was here. So it's definitely not easy, and it definitely takes a community to decide they want to protect those lands. An individual farmer on their own would have a really difficult time kind of getting through that process. And that's where the Conservancy works really hard, and other NGOs and nonprofits, to get through that process with people and provide them match funding, work through the federal process and all of those sort of things that it takes to get from beginning to end.
My biggest challenge has been 2020, and I'm not alone in that, I'm sure. But that was a case of, our revenue dropped to zero. We still had a lot of expenses and debt service and things we, had to pay for. So it was just a challenging year. How are we going to get through this year? And anyway, it was daunting.
It took really it took 7 years to build the coalition, to identify the partners in it, to help us educate farmers about water and about the needs and where it is the lifeblood of the crop. And then to educate, then take that message elsewhere to those of us who come and visit. It's like, this is a special place. We have some really great food products we put out here locally. Come join us, eat in our restaurants. But understand that we value these commodities, this river, these other things as much as we value those, and we understand that that river is the lifeblood for all of this agriculture out there.
The Hauser family committed to continuing to grow barley and be part of this system where, we have a local malting facility, we have farms growing barley, and we have a flowing river. So I think it's taken everybody's part and kind of a lot of faith that this will work out and that good partnerships result in good projects.
We're so fortunate to be in this area. It's so beautiful here. It's just so important to continue farming because no one's making more farmland and no one's making more water. So we need to preserve and protect what we have now. And with the partnership with TNC, we are continuing that and hopefully succeeding and showing others that it can be done. It's so important that other people see us, what we do with TNC, and hopefully they too can help preserve and protect.
So I think I speak like my friend Chip when it comes to the favorite beer. We like anything from Belgium. We particularly like a style of beer called Duvel, a brand. It's not a hoppy beer. It's not one of the IPAs. It's unique. It's driven by the yeast, a very unique strain of yeast. And the beauty of it is it's made with barley and wheat. And so when we make a batch of it, we get to use Sanawa wheat and Sanawa barley to make it. And I'm making a batch right now, which can be shared with those of you who are like-minded.